basically the dream. But, you know, and snakes, they're sort of like the messengers between the worlds. And the snake wasn't, you know, it didn't attack me or anything. But, you know, so I think this was like the fear of the ego death, and that, you know, if you really want to do the work deep in the garden, you know, if you want to have the messages from the other world, then, you know, you have to accept these ego deaths. And, you know, and I failed to do it. So I looked at that and I thought, oh, that's kind of archetypal dream as well, you know. So I thought, cool.
Yeah, the ego was just the way I looked at it. I was thinking about it quite a bit, because it just followed a preparing and an ascent and descent. You know, Gary was preparing the elevator that goes up and down, and then now he's when he approaches the back of the garden, so he's really approaching the unconscious, you know, and he finds there the he's immediately a 15-foot snake, which could envelop him, you know, comes up very quickly to address him. And then he backs away, because the ego is not ready to give up control, you know. So you know what, and Ava had a really wonderful thing, that it sort of was like the snake that swallowed the elephant in Little Prince, you know. But the at the end of our discussion about the dream, we started talking about the dragon, you know, because the snake is sort of a dragon-like being. It certainly has a different character. But the thing is, this is something Joseph Campbell stressed too, is what does the dragon guard? Okay, the unconscious, this prima materia being, which in the alchemical emblems, as we give it attention, changes into a stag, and then into a unicorn, and then into the divine child, from the dragon aspect. What does the dragon guard? It guards gold, which is the, you know, that's the, what alchemy seeks, you know, is the treasure hard to attain. And it also guards the soul, a beautiful woman, the anima. And so this snake, what the snake has in the back of the garden, or what Gary could obtain if he could get past the 15-foot snake, is the treasure hard to attain and his own soul. I mean, that was kind of my feelings after.
Yeah, no, I think that's a better summary than I gave. So I've got today for the archetype we're doing, and this one's going to be a longer one, because, you know, this archetype is it's really the archetype of Sophia. And let's see. So, you know, it was hard to make this, you know, a short presentation. So this one's the Popus, and the Popus symbolizes the primary yin, or feminine aspect of the Godhead. And that places her at a level equal to God or Jesus. And in the spiritualized aspect, this would be Sophia, divine wisdom, or the Virgin Mary. And if you look at Jung's analysis of the book of Job, he thought that God was going through an evolution in consciousness, and that the story of Job symbolized a part of this. And it was Sophia that humanized God in the myth. And von Franz ties this over to the alchemist as well. She said that the alchemist created a concept of an evolving God image that as a process requires support. And I think it's like Raff in his books, you know, he's always telling us how, you know, our self, that God, needs our help to evolve. So the feminine aspect that this represents, may be the support for the evolving consciousness of God, or if you prefer a different term, the self. So in the card, the Popus holds the Book of Prophets, which foretells her destiny as a carrier of the divine child. Again, this ties right back into the self. The indication is that through the Popus, that the spirit will be realized, brought down into reality. And as the receptive feminine, she is the instrument of enactment. She does not choose her destiny, she's chosen. So one of the freedoms that we have is our attitude in the face of all circumstances. And the yellow yoke that goes across the Popus' breast might indicate that she accepts her fate. In her hands, she holds the Book of Prophecy. She accepts the word with all of her being. But she's not complacent, because this looks exactly like a bee's hive. And that serves as a reminder that, when her instincts are attacked, are thwarted, that, she can attack with vicious stings. So if we contrast the qualities of the Popus with the magician suggests action, and the Popus is almost rooted in place. Her tiara and book indicate containment and tradition. In contrast, the magician's freedom and space, the Popus pillars mark the limitations of a hard reality. She's grounded. The magician's power is fire. The Popus power is water, cool, dark, fluid, a moon power. The magician controls by quick force, knowledge, and idea. The Popus rules by slow persistence, love, and feminine patience. The magician's magic is out front. The Popus magic is veiled and hidden, like her hair. The magician's power is somewhat under his conscious control. The Popus nature of her magic is hidden even from her. It happens in part behind her back, as pictured. The Popus essence is paradox. She encompasses all, both good and evil, life and death. And in the Rider-Waite tarot card, the lady's garment flow into and become water. This stream, woman-like, will follow the line of least resistance, adapting itself to the contours of the earth, moving ever downward to collect in pools and lakes which mirror the sky. The feminine nature is reflective. Through immersing himself in the depths of woman, man comes to know himself. By looking into the images in the deep unconscious, we come to know ourselves. So as a symbol, the Popus would represent for man a very high development of the anima, when he becomes aware of her and her needs, and she can inspire him and lead him to his own totality. For a woman, the Popus could be a highly differentiated form of Eros. She would symbolize womanliness, a spiritually developed self. So what is our archetypal connection to the Popus in everyday life? If we take this to a creative act, in particular, the creative act of memory, then we have the feminine principle colors the creative act of memory with emotion. And when we remember something, we recreate her image. To the bits and pieces of the person in question, we add an important piece of ourselves, an emotional content of our own experience. By remembering somebody, we create a new entity. In his book, Two Hands of God, Alan Watts reminds us that when Isis reassembled the dismembered body of Osiris, she literally remembered him, brought all of his members back together. So we bring the forgotten one back into a new wholeness. We reinstate her in the collective world. Pittman and McGee describes the process of individuation as becoming whole, as bringing back all those pieces of us that have broken off, or another way to think of it as remembering. In the Black Book, Jung describes the process of active imagination of placing himself in the images that come up, which is an act of remembering or amplifying the image. And I'm quoting from the Black Book here. Well, you see, these two are too vague for me to be able to say much about them. They are only the beginning. You only use the retina of the eye at first to objectify. Then, instead of keeping on trying to force the image out of you, you just want to look in. Now, when you see these images, you want to hold them and see where they take you, how they change. And you want to try to get in the picture yourself, to become one of the actors. When I first began to do this, I saw landscapes. Then I learned how to put myself into the landscape, and the figures would talk to me and I would answer them. So that to me is, again, it's kind of a way of remembering. It's been said that if you love another person, you've given them a small part of your soul, and they in turn have given you a part of their soul. If they die, the loss is very painful because they've taken a part of your soul with them. But in turn, having a small part of their soul, you can bring them with you on your journey. You can remember them as a restorative and creative act. To remember, to recreate the image, to bring back into wholeness. The word memory is derived from the Old English mournan, meaning to mourn. When we mourn, we must have a process of keeping in touch with our emotional struggles with loss and change, because otherwise the individuation process stalls. The purpose represents the critical aspect here to me, the ability for receptivity and acceptance. For Jung, life was a dream, and he treated it as such, forming a rich symbology and even on occasion, a notation. Symbol formation is centrally linked to our emotional process. Remember that the transcendent function is the act of joining opposites into the uniting symbol. If we accept these images as living symbols, which when imbued with an emotional content, they certainly are, then it would be worthwhile reviewing what goes on in the act of symbol formation. The key attributes of symbols are they only emerge in the context of meaning making. They're not only representations of objects, but the fluid relationship between the objects. And they are emergent, you especially see that in dreams. The relational aspect of the symbol enable it to take on a living reality in the imaginal world. In some of the Eastern practices, the devotee takes on an aspect of one of the imagined goddesses to feel the experience, the emotions and the feelings that could be associated. If successful, this has created an embodied living symbol that can be felt and re-experienced through memory. This is done through active imagination, and those of you that have attended the meditation portion of this group probably remember the Kali practice. I've also mentioned the therapist that at times, to avoid transference, would assume a particular archetype. I bring this up because the Popus, being the representation of divine wisdom of Sophia, it would be useful to have an idea of how to remain open to her influence. Unlike the magician, we cannot consciously assume this archetype because of the paradox that what she is hidden even from herself. We can only assume an attitude that lowers the ego's influence, that puts us into a state of receptivity. I think it's safe to say she is certainly about wholeness, about remembering, bringing back that which is broken off, and about seeing the world in its symbolic form. For my meditations, I occasionally use a prayer as a ritual, and one of them is as follows. My soul will always stand ajar, that if heaven should inquire, she will not be obliged to wait. So what is behind this idiom is an attitude of gratitude and also hopeful expectancy. Jung said that for a flow to occur, there has to be a state of hopeful expectancy on one side and awareness and dedication on the other side. Gratitude opens us to experiences outside of ourselves and makes us aware of the importance of community. If we wish to connect with the divine, we know it will only be by grace. Although it is only by chance that we connect, we hope by use of the spiritual practices to increase the frequency. The Popus would represent the highest form of connection to the divine, the present moment, the experiential state, the state of flow. And that's today's.
Wonderful, Gary. Now, did you say you sent the text? Email?
Oh, you know what? So what I'm having fun with these, it's like, so what I've done is I've started, my own little book of archetypes. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to send out the link to that. And as it gets updated, you'll see all the updates in there because, it will be the Google link. And it's like, yeah, and the interesting thing about this is this actually comes from this ultra learning book that I've been reading, and also this person that's working on this book of the philosophy of expertise improvement. But one of the key things is that like normally you learn something or you think you learn it, and like if you have to take a test, you go back and you re-review it, and that's kind of like the study. But what he says in the book is that really the only way that something becomes a working knowledge is you have to put it in your own words. You have to put it in your own concepts. So I've been doing that. I've been like, okay, I'm just, for all the the material that I think is important, I'm going to go back and I'm going to rewrite it and try to put it in my own words.
You do a very good job.
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah.
That's what's like trying to swallow an elephant for me. It was too much. So I'm glad that you are sending a link so I can read it and trying to melt down myself.
Yeah, if you read his other ones, they just read like poetry. I mean, it's one line, one thought, and then they just keep following, and it's like it's just not prosaic at all. It's
I loved it, and especially if it's brought down to everyday level. Yeah. And I think this Sophia also can appear in animal form, I think, and as a wise animal that will guide you.
Oh, good point. Good point. So, that's like, yeah, I love that, because then we see her in all the fairy tales then.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I've seen images of her as a black bird, and would appear to be the Black Madonna actually. But yeah, so that's it's so beautiful and so rich, but it's also a little bit frightening. She's so incredibly powerful. I think that it's almost overwhelming, isn't it?
And you only get to her indirectly. There is no direct path. It's all a spiral.
I wanted to say when you're talking about active imagination, Gary, and one of mine is involving a figure that changes from my shadow to clearly, to a Madonna priestess. But as I do sand tray therapy, you can bury the Madonna half in the sand, half out of the sand, all the way under the sand. And that is that hidden nature that you cannot ever quite grasp, especially in words. So yeah, thanks for giving me another clue to my process of active imagination and how I do it.
Well, and the thing that strikes me about this is that you know, it's like, so I took a couple of aspects and ran with it, but in truth, there's so many things you could take, you know, I mean, so it's like, yeah, you know, I covered a tiny amount of what could really be said, I think.
You know, what was funny is I always saw Sophia, the wisdom of God, you know, is what it's called, the wisdom of God. You know, this is actually, in my own understanding, and this is not mythical, it really is my own understanding, is that she is the one who sits, when I first saw her, she sits in a field of flowers surrounded by mountains, and there are bees everywhere, you know, and I had this one dream where there was this big stump, and in the middle of the stump was just a bunch of bees, and that I was to put my head in there like a baptism, you know, that I was supposed to put my head in there like a baptism. But the one thing, I don't know who it really is, but when I go see her, I'm seeing her before there is any life on the planet. She's on Earth when they're just rocks, you know, and the wisdom of God. And I ask her, because supposedly she was supposed to be there coexistent in Genesis, you know, and at the beginning, at the creation of the earth. But she is the one who designs the bodies, you know, or who makes bodies. And I just come to her. And, you know, one time I asked to see her face, and when I saw it, boom, I mean, it was so powerful. It just, like Annette said, it was over. The act of imagining was over for the day, and it was just a glimpse. But anyway, you go down there and you ask her, you know, what is on your mind, Mother? You know, I mean, this is the designer of all life, all wisdom. And I ask her, you know, here I am, one of your creatures. What can you tell me? You know, what do you have to say to me of all the generations over billions of years of life that you've created, and what can you tell me? You know. So anyway,
Nice.
is anybody else have any comments? Those are wonderful comments. Go ahead, Angela.
Can I ask? Yes, can I ask you, Gary? There is this painting of Jung's in the Red Book of a temple and a woman in the temple covered in white. And then in one of a lecture I heard that Philemon, who seems to be, I think, in the opposite page, seems to step on her. So the whole temple seems to be at the base of Philemon. Are you aware of this image of the temple? I am trying to send it into the chat, but I don't think it allows me.
Oh, no, what you want to do is share your screen. So just have it up on your computer and then go to share screen, which is the icon is right by chat, and then you can share it.
All right, I'll try and do that then, because I really, okay. All right, would you say that the High Priestess is here?
Well, to me she is, but you know, I remember Craig actually commented on this image. So go ahead, Craig, because you.
No, that is Sophia.
Yeah,
that's Sophia.
Because now I'll stop sharing, because do you remember the image of Philemon who has his hands open? Mm-hmm. Again in the Red Book. I'll try and find that, because I was told in one of the lectures I attended last year that Philemon is actually having his feet on her temple. That was something I didn't know. I'll try and find now Philemon's picture. Philemon's image. It might take a while, but I just wanted your opinion of both of you, really. If you feel that then, if that is true, then Philemon is sort of grounding himself in Sophia's temple, which is interesting for the meaning of, you know.
Yeah, at least an act of dedication.
Yeah, he's actually standing on Philemon's temple. I mean, on the temple. Yeah, you're right, Angelique. His feet.
Yes,
Yeah.
His feet. It seems that he's.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's if the person who shared that in that lecture had really read something coming from Jung, or if it was their own interpretation. I didn't have the opportunity to really ask them, but
Oh, in the red
Find
book.
it. I've seen it, definitely. I wish I
Yeah.
could find it quickly, but you're right, Angelique, that is.
that's the one.
Yeah.
I'll
Share it.
yes, I'll try and share. Just a moment to. My computer is a bit slow. Doesn't. Here it is. Go to the whole one.
When you share, you should see a bunch of screens on your computer and just pick the one that has the image.
Yes, it's still. It takes time to load the image.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, don't worry. I'll.
Oh, wait, here, I found it. Yeah, let me see if I can. I found
Oh,
it.
did you?
Yeah.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
let me just see if I can find it real quick here. I just saw it and I got to re-find it, but I didn't have it in my.
Let's try this one.
Yeah.
They are not whole, because if it's not whole, then you can't see where he's stepping on. And yes, no. That's the most luminous.
I just had it here a second ago and I didn't
Yes,
have it
I
here.
think I'll share. Okay.
Okay.
That's the one.
There it
Oh,
is.
And-
yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I remember that one.
And now they said in the lecture that this under his feet is actually her temple.
Sophia.
Yes, that's the temple of the woman covered in white.
Yes.
The previous
of the-
image.
yes.
And actually they said
Beautiful.
that, yes, and the woman who was lecturing said that when you close the red book, because Philemon's image is opposite here, you have a conjuncture because they meet. I don't know, because I don't have this edition with the images, but the story is he's grounded on her, and then by the closing of the book they meet, and that's no accident. That was especially chosen from Jung. I wish I could find more on that, because that's an interesting interpretation
Yeah, I like it.
about
Well,
Jung's
plus,
view.
I like the snake in the background there too, the messenger between worlds.
Yes, that's right.
The kingfisher blue, you know, after Tony Wolfe died, she came to Jung in a vision in a dress of kingfisher blue. You know, that was the dress she was wearing, was that color. You know, so something about the kingfisher, this bird that is also connected with the depths. You know, it's this. It would be more of a Merlin-like figure, a magician. You know, someone who is spiritual and yet is very into the not overly spiritual. Yeah, the Fisher King there too. He's the king of the Grail castle, king of the vessel.
But can someone explain why the snake was like that on the picture, so snored around?
Yes, so snarled.
That must have a special
Yeah,
kind of.
I don't know, but it almost looks like a Celtic cross, you know, the way it is. I mean a Celtic, what do they call those? The Celtic symbol where it's all like that. Do you know, Annette, what they call that?
Dragon-like.
Yeah,
It's a
very
knot,
dragon.
isn't it? It's a knot.
Yeah, a knot, Celtic knot. It's called a Celtic knot.
A
Yeah.
Gordian.
I mean, it
knot
almost
is
looks
in
like a
our
Celtic.
Knot, yeah.
Carol sent.
Yeah, or a Gordian knot or a Celtic knot, or it's just it is definitely a weaved snake, a snake that creates the warp and woof of the upper and the lower and the horizontal threads. So beautiful.
Well, let's go ahead and turn this over to Azine so that she'll have sufficient
Yeah,
time.
Azine, are you ready today or not? If you're not, that's fine, but were you going to do a presentation?
I still have a couple of slides,
Okay.
the PowerPoint, and I didn't have time to go through it and see how long does it take the whole presentation.
That's no problem. Why don't I just go in? I'll start lecture 11. Is that okay, Annette, Azine?
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah, you
better
can do it
for me
next
to have the whole presentation next session.
Perfect. Okay, well, let's just, we'll just, we've got a few, a while here. We'll just maybe go maybe 30 minutes into lecture 20, and then we'll leave the last 30 minutes open, or 11, lecture 11, and then we'll leave the last 30 minutes open for questions. But, you know, this lecture 11 is really, you know, it's about the seeds and about the three hands, but it is also really about the, just the, this very strange nature of the Great Mother, you know, and of Kali and of Hecate and of you know, this dark chthonic mother, you know, and what does it mean to be dark, you know? It's very interesting, you know, but and the other thing that's somewhat here that you won't find everywhere is this Jungian concept, which I think, you know, he got from the object of the rainmaker story, you know, that the only way that you can set the outer world right is not by intention, but only by setting the inner world right can you make the outer world. Because if you try to make intentionally the outer world right or good, you're going to create a huge shadow somewhere else, because that's not in balance, you know, it's not Taoist, it's not the way nature works. So if we work to, you know, we'll go over that, but it's just a wonderful thing to talk about. And you know, like I don't think that many people buy this, but it certainly makes sense, you know, the aspect. So we'll just start on the seeds, and this is.
I have a question about that, Greg.
Yeah,
Is that okay?
yeah, go ahead, Annette.
I do think, and I can come back later to the Celtic cross if you want, but my question now is, I think that happens a lot in positive meditations where you kind of project an image, like a focused reality, a positive outlook or a positive goal, or this goal setting you see a lot. And I think that's is that the same what you're talking about, that you kind of change the outer reality by setting a goal? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. If you, what he or what she's saying is that the only way to, well, she's talking about sorting the seeds. The only way to set the outer world right is to sort the seeds within, you know.
Yeah.
If you try to go outside intentionally to create good, what you're normally doing, that is a projection, or I know I need to do this in myself. But instead of doing it in myself, I'm going to project it on the outer world and try to correct the outer world.
Okay, yeah.
And what Jung, well, you know, you've heard the story of the Taoist king where, you know, he goes out into the kingdom and he, in disguise, and he wanted to know what everyone thought of the king, you know, and they say, "We got a king? I didn't know we had a king. You think you even have a king? I didn't hear. I never heard of him." And so then the king goes back to his castle very pleased because he knows he's ruling well, you know. But I mean, no, and Jung, you know, said really, you know, there's this this idea of the collective consciousness, the zeitgeist, you know, the sort of the ideas of today, you know, versus, and if you look at them, they're different. Take the 60s, look at the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. I mean, unbelievably different characters in every one of those decades. The 50s, the 40s, 30s, the 20s, you know, I mean, this zeitgeist changes all the time. But the idea of the collective consciousness evolving, you know, like this. But you know, the idea of trying to correct nature and trying to correct the outer world, which do you do? Well, nature is not very peaceful herself, you know, so I don't know. It's a great mystery, but we'll go through it here, and at least we'll get the psyche's point of view here. Right? Okay. We're gonna have to finish it in a couple weeks, but I'll just get started on this. You know, this the motif. We're talking about the seeds of the corn seeds is often connected with the underworld and the mother goddess of the chthonic world. The seeds are a symbol of the souls of the dead and of the ancestral ghosts. Now, what you were going to be talking about is the sorting of the seeds. So now she's just talking about what are we sorting, you know, when we sort seeds. So it's somewhat related to the feminine. It's related to nature, you know, the world, the mother goddess of the chthonic world and the ancestral world. And in ancient Greece, they near the hearth there was a pot in which the corn seeds, which had been mixed into kind of a fig jelly, were kept. And they symbolically represented the womb of the underworld, the womb of the earth. And the seeds in there were the dead, the ancestral world, which rests in the earth. The ancestral world, it resides in the underworld, under the earth. And so like the corn that resurrects in the spring, you know, this is also was the Native American myth too. They have many images like this. The corn that resurrects in the spring, the dead or the ghosts were called Demetroi. They were the ones who belong to Demeter. And they rest like corn in the wombs of the goddess. And in a festival held about the date of Halloween, the pots were uncovered and the underworld thus symbolically opened, you know, at Halloween, you know, at All Saints' Day or All Souls' Day. And Carenier used the expression, mundus patet, the cosmos is open. And so for 3 days, the ghosts lived with the living. And they came back to roam the houses. Now, this is Halloween we're talking about. Where did the image of the spooks of Halloween come from? So at Halloween, the lids of the where the underworld is symbolically uncovered is opened, and so the ancestral world can come back into the house. And So every room is filled with the spooks and the ghosts. They participate at meals, and a portion is always set down for them. And then after 3 days, they're driven out of the house with olive twigs and holy water. And they're told that they have had enough of life and were to return to their own world, and they no longer wanted spooks about the house to disturb the living, and the lids were replaced on the pots. And so poppy seeds, we're going to talk about those in lecture 12. They also point to the world of the dead and the ghosts, but they also have this image, the poppy seeds, of their soporific effect, similar to hashish and other remedies. They're a means for contacting the beyond. By chewing ivy leaves and other poisonous substances, you can now have to do with the mystery of sinking into the beyond. You can sink into the beyond, the underworld, and to get in touch with its secrets. So this is the idea of the corn seeds and the poppy seeds. Thus, in the deepest meaning, the grains here have to do with the mystery of life and death and of transformation. And they also are symbols for the self, because they represent that seed and root within us that has not been able to come out because of the willfulness of the ego, and that's the idea of the mortar and pestle. That until the mortar and pestle brings you down to the lowest point where you can't fall any farther, which is the turning point, the seeds that we sort can't grow, not consciously anyway. And when we're going to find out, they do come in. If you don't pay any attention to them, what happens is they, there's that wonderful, I can't remember it exactly, in Ion, where, Jung has this quote, which is in the context of a big long paragraph, but everybody quotes it, that what we don't allow in the depths to come through consciously will live in the outer world as fate. It's to whom who is not led by the soul is dragged by it. There's this aspect. I'm garbling those quotes, but anyway, the analogy in alchemy is referred to as the multiplicatio, the vessel within a dark vessel. That's where the philosopher's stone germinates, and at a certain point you can open up the vessel, and now the philosopher's stone has developed or grown, and everything, every metal touched by it is transformed into gold. So now what happens in the vessel? It goes through dissolution in the darkness and then coagulation. First of all, the dissolving aspect. This is the membering and the remembering, Gary. I mean, this is what happens in the night sea journey. When you don't know anything about astronomy, and you see or about the universe or how it's constructed, and every night you see the sun go down below the sea, and what happened? Where did that go? The sun. I mean, and you had no idea. But then you see it come up in a wonderful dawn in the east when dawn breaks. And then you say, well, this happens in me too. This happens in me too. But what happens in that time that the light of consciousness is below the horizon? And this is where you're cut up into a million pieces and then put back together again. And we're going to go over that too in a second. I mean, maybe not today, but anyway. So the psychological analogy seems to have to do with the fact that one succeeds consciously and positively to relate to an archetypal constellation. There's widespread effect, multiplicatio. So once you start to relate to the seeds, once you've sorted your seeds, once you've got the Philosopher's Stone, then there is this widespread effect. That's what we're going to talk about this whole lecture, is the widespread effect of sorting the seeds. So if the rainmaker gets in touch in the right way with the powers of beyond, rain falls over the whole country. And if the nobleman sits in his room with right thoughts and writes, and he is heard 1,000 miles around. You know, and Chuang-Tzu says, as long as the ruler tries to do the right thing, actively tries to make good or bad laws, the empire will get worse and worse. If, on the contrary, he retires and gets right in himself, inwardly, the problems will solve themselves. And there's this wonderful, it's very mysterious conversation between the ruler of the yellow earth and the original mist. He asks the original mist, he wants to do right in his kingdom, and so that all have enough to eat and no one would cheat. And the original mist tells him, I have no idea how you could ever do that. You know? And so the ruler of the earth left his empire, sat for 3 months on straw in a hut, and then he returned to the original mist and said humbly, well, then how can I bring myself into order? And now this is the voice of nature itself speaking here. The original mist. He says, you should not think of putting things right, but should stay in reality and not bother about outer things. Stay where you are. And then the ruler of the yellow earth says, well, what about nature? And he says, this is nature talking about itself. You think nature always comes to an end, but she is only at the beginning. You think nature always knows her aims and her goals, but it goes much deeper, much further than that. You think nature has already given everything she can give, but nature still has infinitely more in store to give. And then he added, I don't want to talk to mortal beings anymore. The people are fading away. They are dying. I am alone. I am eternal. And then he turned away from the ruler of the yellow earth. So it refers to the secret. Now it's talking about the seeds and the Philosopher's Stone. It refers to the secret that ultimately we can touch something, which is universality or oneness of nature within us, which generally, well, now this is the secret of putting yourself right. What happens when you put yourself right? Are all the chairs on the deck of the Titanic are now in order? Is that what it means to put yourself right? You know, it is something more aligned with when you put yourself right, you suddenly are now open to synchronicities in your life. You have opened yourself to synchronistic events. So at that point, not everything's random. You know, nature sees this being who's in the Tao, and it now can use it as its vehicle in this strange, non-random thing. It's not random. There's a synchronicity is where the psychic world and the physical world are now in sync and are trying to accomplish something symbolic together. So that would be the rocks and psyche, the rocks and the earth and life are all and time itself are working together on one thing. So outside, if one succeeds in getting oneself right about a problem, then miracles begin to happen, synchronicities. Outside events fall into place too, as though getting right oneself had an effect there. And it's not causal. We have not caused things to get right. They get right synchronistically, which is magically. And so that the superior man knows his seeds and roots and acts at once. So now this is her little introduction to sorting the seeds. So it's pretty deep. We bring things into order by knowing our own nature, our own root, and our own seed. So the corn and the poppy seeds are our roots. They are the seeds which we have to clarify in the moment while they are still seeds. So if patiently one succeeds in doing this, then one can disentangle or give a possible turn to what seemed impossible situations. And how deep these things go, one cannot say, has much to do with the female Godhead and her uncanny powers. It's not just Hecate or Demeter, but it is women, it's themselves. Now this is very interesting, and listen to it with an open mind. That women themselves, like Hecate and Demeter, without knowing it, rule even life and death in their surroundings. The thing that she says that is so beautiful here is, I'm going to say this before I go on. It's a little bit later. That everyone incredibly blossoms in the surroundings of a woman who has sorted her seeds and who is in right relationship with herself. Now, really, who can deny that? Because she is like the positive mother goddess who makes the corn grow. But if the relationship with her own inner self is wrong, she is more likely to emanate the effects of the death goddess, of Hecate, and she puts the blight of death over all those around her. Now, that is a pretty powerful statement, and we're going to kind of flesh that out, but it is just what she's saying here is how deep these things go. One cannot say. It has to do with the feminine Godhead and her uncanny powers, her uncanny synchronistic powers. And so women, to a great extent, without even knowing it, rule even life and death in their surroundings. If a husband dies or the children die, very often women in the family were not necessarily at fault, but they were, they had some kind of a synchronistic role here, not causal, but a role. But there is great inflation and destructiveness if a woman thinks she is responsible. But she's really sort of the conduit of the great mother, or this uncanny powers of the feminine Godhead in outer reality, whether she knows it or not. So, a mother thought to herself when her son was going to war, she really wouldn't mind if he didn't come back. And then he doesn't. And so now she's convinced that she was responsible for his death. But that is inflation. People who she says, a group of people that live together always wish one of the people in the group was dead. She says, She's never analyzed anyone who did not have such secret thoughts, half conscious, half not. You know, it's human nature. It's best to admit it. She'd never analyzed a mother who hasn't wished, for God's sake, let's just get rid of the whole lot. But if the ego identifies with that in the wrong way, the devil is loose. Now, what she's going to say here is very powerful and somewhat provocative. So I'm hoping everyone we just listen with an open mind here. So there is underneath this tremendous nature in women. That's what her power is. She is very, very close to nature, and very close to the Great Mother, and very close to her uncanny powers, and very close to the Hecate and Demeter, the one that can make the crops grow or can make the crops fail. Now we can say, throw that all out, it's garbage. You know, that was then, this is now, you know, but then you're denying this, the reality of that. What Demeter can make the crops grow, or she can make the crops fail. Now, so we're going to be talking about the dark, you know, when we're talking about Baba Yaga, you know, she's trying to talk about Baba Yaga and the seeds. Now, if we get nothing else out of this, let's just understand a little bit more nuanced what it means to be the goddess of death or the Great Mother. We don't have to carry this into the outer world, but let's at least get a little bit of more of a flavor of her character, you know. So the dark side of the self in every woman has that capacity of being the ruler of life or death. Now, if it is not misused in white or black magic, ego remains with its own task. It has tremendous effect. This is this line that I just read earlier, but I mean, I have felt this in my life. If there is a woman who is in, that people blossom incredibly in the surroundings of a woman who in her deepest depths is in right relationship with herself. You just get into her proximity, you know, and she doesn't have to say anything. There's just an object of healthiness around her, healthy psychological life in her presence. And she's like the positive mother goddess who makes the corn grow. But if the relationship with her own inner self is wrong, she's more likely to emanate the effects of the death goddess Hecate and put a blight of death over those in her proximity. You know, yeah, that's very good, Aline. Children sometimes look marvelous and blossom completely in a house in which the mother shouts all the time. She wishes they'd all go to hell. And why? Because in her own way, she is right with the Tao. Her positive instincts supports the children with the positive vital something which gives them security. And even though she may tell them they are all the devil's spawn and horrible brats, they develop perfectly because she's right in herself. So, you know, now we're getting to the Cinderella's task. This is the differentiation of women, you know, where men are going to do it from 10 miles up and do it with the mathematical formula. Women, or the feminine principle anyway, has its own way of doing that. And it's not with the mathematical formula, it's with sorting the seeds. To penetrate in the into the depths of her secret, the subtle effects come out when you penetrate into the depths of her secret. To bring to consciousness and selective discrimination into that hidden nature of hers, which operates unseen in the background. Now, if a person can penetrate, a woman can penetrate that realm consciously and there separate the bad from the good, she does something which corresponds to the hero's deed of slaying the dragon, building the new town, or freeing the people from slavery, or liberating. Now, the idea is that she does it consciously. Remember, this is Marion Woodman's whole theme is conscious femininity, sorting the seeds. You know, they're often sorted, but consciously. And then that usually leads to the, this just, you know, bad effect, or something that is not going to be the people who blossom incredibly in the surroundings of a woman who's in right relationship with herself, who has discriminated by sorting the seeds. So in analysis, that's what we do. We sort out the seeds of the analysan. And she gives this wonderful kind of a long story. I don't know, what time is it? Oh, we're almost out of time. Yeah, but the long story where they, we'll go into it a little bit more next time. But this is going to be a little difficult. And I'm glad that, you know, I'm going to have a week to, you know, with the zine next time, who's going to give her a presentation, is to assimilate this and try to make it understandable, you know. But the where there was a son, or a husband, two sons, and the woman, and they're out fishing. The boat overturns. The children, the boys can't swim. The man pulls them to the shore, and then he dies of a heart attack. But they're so far away that they, so he's dead now there. And there's the mother with the two sons. And they had to sit there 3 days with his corpse, you know, until they were rescued. And then they came back. The son was immediately, you know, he never slept. He didn't do anything for 2 months and stopped going to school altogether. And pretty soon he's up on the roofs of the houses throwing knives at passersby. And this woman is trying to figure out what's wrong with him. And she keeps coming to different psychologists, Freudians, and everything. She finally comes to von Franz. And von Franz wants to hear, does he have any dreams? He has a dream where he goes into a room and there's a TV before there were any TVs. And then he's very happy and excited. And then a voice says, this is where you must remain from now on. Your life is a failure. So that was the dream, you know, and von Franz, eventually what happens, and it's, we want to tell the whole story. But the what happened was not that the event of the husband and dying in the boat overturning and the 3 days it took to rescue, that the woman needed to, she had a hero archetype in her, but she was too lazy to do it herself, so she projected it on her son and on her husband and drove them crazy. And once she von Franz told her that, she just broke down emotionally. She goes back, takes this burden off her son, immediately sleeps 8 hours, and goes to school the next, you know, right after that. And the whole idea was that she hadn't sorted her seeds, you know. But anyway, I'm glad that we're going to have a little bit more time to consider this, you know, after Zine does her presentation here, because this is a very difficult chapter. And what we've got to cover later too are the three hands. And I wanted to show one picture about that real quickly. Let me just see. here. You know, one thing about this, trying to do good in the world, you know, you create you know, an unseen problem elsewhere. You know, there were no devils in the world until you had a Christ. I mean, this is what Jung tells you in Ion, you know, and so you had this quaternity, two totalities. You have God the Father, God the Son, Mary, and the Holy Spirit. So this is this triad, you know, the Baba Yaga has the red man, the black man rider, the red rider, the black rider, and the white rider. Mary has God the Father, the Holy Spirit, and God the Son. And then if you go, we'll hear about Fra Truda. She had the red devil, the black devil, and the green devil. So she's sort of the chthonic counterpart. And there were no devils in the world. There were underworld beings, chthonic beings, but they weren't the incarnation of evil until you had an incarnation of complete whiteness, complete goodness in the Christ, in that figure. Suddenly he has to have a counterpart, you know, the devil. And so the unforeseen occurrence of having a figure who is all good is suddenly out of nowhere comes the figure of all evil as well, you know. And so anyway, that let's just have some discussion. You know, Gary, did you want to lead it, or are you all let out?
Yeah, sure. No, no, I'm good. You know, I did want to ask you though. So, with your previous example, you know, and the son and the father who have the problems with the woman's projection of the hero archetype, and anyone can answer this, but what would your examples of that be? Would that just be general goals, or would that be something else? Oh, you're muted, Craig.
Yeah, well, what she was going to do is be very demanding and very hard on both her husband, who was an introverted, helpless, kind of a mild-mannered being, and then her son, who wasn't ambitious at all. And yet here she is incredibly ambitious. Now, that's what she said. Who would this dream benefit? The one where, you know, you're going to be, from now on, your life is in this room. You're going to be watching TV. You're never going to leave. And your life is a failure. And Franz says, who would this dream benefit? She said it was someone who was morbidly ambitious. Well, and then so she asked her, is your son morbidly ambitious? She says, no. He doesn't care if there's people better than him. He's never cared. He just is an average kid. And then she says, well, then you are morbidly ambitious. You know, so she was trying to take this but she was too lazy to follow up on it herself. So she says, instead of me letting this very ambitious archetype develop in myself, that's too much work. I'm going to have my son and husband do the work for me, you know. But then it ended up, so she's using this, the uncanny powers of the feminine godhead are suddenly causing this psychosis everywhere. But one thing she does say is that, you know, she could have had another husband and another son, and this wouldn't have happened to them. So she said if she had analyzed the husband, she wouldn't say, you're this way because of your wife. She'd want to find out what's wrong with him, you know. But she says sometimes suicidal men are attracted by such women as the rock on which to wreck their ship. You know, they're just this unconscious way of accomplishing that task. And she's got some other wonderful comments about it. But as far as developing the hero archetype, she didn't really go too much into it. But
that's just fascinating, because I can think of a couple of marriages where I see that, where the incredibly ambitious wife and the man that's not that way at all, but he's successful, but certainly not driven,
Young, I'm just going to mention one other thing, because this is the way Jungians really believe. I mean, they believe, the Jung said the one difference between me and everyone else is I believe the psyche is real, it's alive, and it is here now, and I'm in it, and it's not in me, and but he got to the point where he was not going to tell. He was working with two brothers, and their mother was a devouring mother, and he said something to them like, imagine that she's dead, what would you do then? So they both go imagine that she's dead. They didn't do anything to her, but then she died, within a week. And Jung, had all these synchronistic events happen to him. So he was very cautious after that, but again, you're entering the world a little bit when you enter Jungian psychology of the parapsychological and that white and black magic are not necessarily, figments of our imagination. That, that's what Jeffrey Raff actually told me one time, is that you should never do an act of imagination about a living person, because that's could be either white or black magic, that you could have an effect. Because we're all connected, we're connected in a network. And he says that's not, he thought it was dangerous. And, Michael Harner, the shamanic guy, he's an anthropologist that became a shaman. He would say, he wanted you to get a quartz crystal on doing shamanic work. He says, don't ever point this at anybody. This is an anthropologist, saying don't ever point this at anybody. And so anyway, that's kind of what we're getting into here a little bit. So you can be skeptical but anyway, it's just something that is going to be a good hearing. I think we should give it a hearing.
Well, the funny thing is that, I think I'd give it quite a bit more credence after reading that Cubism quantum theory paper, that was like, oh my gosh, there's some evidence. Well, I actually wanted to start with the zine because you were unmuted there for a bit. So I think you had something to say.
We're just coming alive here. Yeah, that was a very interesting reading. What I wanted to say is about the separation of the seeds, good and bad. It's like the final judgment or judgment day. Like what happens is that they supposedly go through what you did in your life and what was good, what was bad, and good people and bad people. So that was the first time I looked at it from this point of view. About the part that it says the ruler, when he wants to change things for good, everything collapses and everything goes wrong. But then he takes a pause and starts working on himself to be in the flow, and then magically everything goes well. Everything happens the way it should be. So I was thinking of this as three archetypes: the warrior, the giver, and the magician, the three archetypes at the end of personality growth. That's for a warrior. Warrior is a doer, and he goes after things. He reaches to the goals, and he's completely, actually, one of the states that warrior is defined by is how he defined himself from the other. He draws line between his territory and the other. And then we have the giver archetype, which is the one right before magician, that you let go. You let go of everything. And you understand the magic of interaction between you and the world, how you give to the world and you receive from the world. So this barrier, the ego, is a little bit porous. You start giving and receiving. And then with magician, when synchronicity happens, things happen in the way that they should, or the magician wants. And for years, I was thinking of synchronicity as a kind of dialogue. In fact, many books, they talk about this dialogue between self and the existence. It's called synchronicity. But at one point, I realized it's not a dialogue, it's a monologue. Why? Because inner and outer are the same. And that's why, that's how we become a magician. We become one with the existence. But again, we are not talking about deleting the whole ego. Ego works here like a reflective surface. So it is important who is doing the magic. The character, the personality, the ego of the magician is important. Otherwise, everybody could be a magician, right? So it's all about having a thin, porous ego that sees what is happening outside, inside, and vice versa. So the whole process, I think, and I was thinking about one of the things that, one of the main fields that in leadership today we're working on is system thinking. So in system thinking, they say, oh, if you are a regular thinker, you just gather your garbage and you put it in a dumpster and everything is done. You're done with it. If you're a system thinker, and when you put it in the dumpster, you're thinking what happens to this garbage after I put it in the dumpster, because we are thinking about the whole system. If you're watering a plant in your home or cutting a tree in your yard, a system thinker think about the system of the plant, the planetary system, the whole plants on the earth. And suddenly I realized system thinking is magician thinking, because it's holistic. And it's all about finding your place in the whole system. That's where the magic happens. Finding your place, the right place, where you are an individual and you are a part of the unity, and whatever that is around you. So it's all really interesting thoughts. Just viewing these ideas from different systems or viewpoints. Like you see magician as a system thinker, Yeah.
Thank you, Zen. Would you like to go next, Kat?
You'll have to forgive me because I've got lots of thoughts and associations and impulses going around in my head right now. But to start off with your talk and just the image of the archetype of the priestess, when you was talking and when Gary was then said his bit about the energy that makes the body and everything else. And I know she's sort of, it's been said that she's the goddess of wisdom, but then I think, and perhaps some other people may relate to this, is like she again is the goddess of life and death, in the fact of, it's like she knows everything. She knows the word as such, but then for me, she's also the creator of it as well. The energy that is the foundation for things to happen, simply because for me, when I saw behind her was the tapestry, the veil. Yeah. For me, she wove that herself. And as she's weaving that, she's weaving the plants and the trees and the air and our bodies and things like that. And then to know her is to go through the processes of individuation, in fact, of knowing ourselves. So we know why we suffered and things like, I know as Zine said, like before, we realize that it's all self, but then behind that veil is something else. And then I think, was it Gary? Yeah, that said that there is always more. So when we get a glimpse behind that little veil, when I saw the reservoir, that big body of water, it's kind of like you can get to the state where I feel that once you've sorted out all your seeds and become more of a magician, then you could literally have pure consciousness flowing through you, and then your life then becomes like, I'm not saying life is drudgery for people and things like that, I'm not meaning it like that, but your life then can become like a creation of art and more conscious, whereas before it feels like life is happening to us. And that's what I've got from that. But this is all really fascinating stuff, and it's right up my street.
Oh, good description of the self there, Kat. Angelique, would you like to go next?
Kat's views really bring me ideas around the equivalent ancient Greek kind of archetypal images, because for the ancient Greeks, Athena is Sophia, and she is born from the head of her father Zeus. But Athena, as you say, Kat, she's a fairly newly famous goddess in the pantheon of the gods, and around the 5th century, and she does not carry within her the life giver or the life taker, so she is quite brainy. So there is with Gnosticism, there is this, I always experience, I always feel strange, because Sophia, is she embodied? Does she have a body? Does she give birth? Or is it like Athena? It's a confusion in me always when this comes up. So the High Priestess, does she have a womb? Because Athena doesn't so much. She's a goddess of the head, and she's a goddess of war. And she's quite much closer to the male archetypes of the pantheon rather than the earlier goddesses like Demeter or Persephone or Hecate, where they are chthonic. So the chthonic elements are not there. So I always have this experience of confusion when Sophia from the Gnostics comes up in terms of where she stands, as you say, Pat. So it was really interesting. The sorting of the seeds for me feels as a way of scattering, as a way of dismembering, that again, in the Heraclitean view and in Jung's view, it creates the enantiodromia necessary for remembering, that you said, Gary. So if I want to have a recollection of my pieces, I first need to scatter. That's where all the chod comes from, all the bone elements, the bone traditions of early Buddhism comes. So because I want wholeness, I dismember. And if I want dismemberment, I gather together. So it's like going one step ahead to bring out the nature's enantiodromia. I become the one who cooks, which can be quite arrogant. That is why it always appears in rituals, not here. It's a strongly religious, archetypally embedded, very strict ritualistic act, like the Eucharist. So it comes with laws that come from the gods. I do not do it. I cannot do it. But once I participate in this mystery, it is being done. So dismemberment brings recollection. Recollection brings dismemberment, not causes, because again, it's a causal, like the synchronicity, I guess. So the sorting of the seeds, in my view, is the humble task, like in Apuleius' story, Eros and Psyche again. She gets into this dark room, so it's an incubation rather stage, the sorting of the seeds. It's not a very extroverted state, if we look at the myths or the fairy tales. So it's an introverted stage. So rather part of the descent, of one's descent in the journey, where they are alone. So it seems that most often the prerequisite is to be alone and quiet with your own dark stuff, in your own darkness. So you are most of the times quite blind when you are called to sort your seeds. So light is not enough usually in this scenery, which makes it all the more mysterious and all the more lonely for the initiate. And then it's also a process that because nothing, if we look at it anthropologically, nothing was useless in these rituals, and the end result is really to separate the seed, because you need to feed yourself, your family, and your tribe. So there is an end result of this separating of the seed at the earliest mysteries, which is survival. So you need to separate the seed because you need to survive, and throw away the seed that's not nurturing, and store it. So not only it's an incubating stage and a lonely one and a dark one, but it's also prepares for the nurturing that is going to follow. So it really creates the gathering and the storage of the psychic energy that will be needed for the ascent later on. So it's a foretelling of the ascent. And then there's also an offering while doing all this. At Eleusis, we have these magical little vessels where they have little round places on them, multiple ones on layers, like on different levels. So one round with a little round where the priestesses had to separate the seeds and put its kind of seed in this little tiny round. And then there's another level, there's a third level, and then each one of them would carry these. I'll try and send to the team through an email. So the separation of the seeds was something that the priestesses had to do and offer them before everything started. So it's also the very, very beginning of initiate's journey. It's a very humbling process, very, very humbling. You bow to the earth, you bow to the earth, and you accept to be her servant. You cannot be above her. You have to get entangled into the dirty job. So you have to do the dirty job, because no one else is going to do it if you want to be initiated. So you got to get your hands dirty. And ultimately, a regathering will come. You are also preparing to feed yourself, to be able to feed yourself and feed others in the process. So, yeah, in that sense, it's far more than Sophia, you know, in the Athena way. It's far more chthonic, I think, in its essence than.
Wow, just beautifully put. You know, actually, Athena as an archetype, especially with what you've described there, you know, that would make a great presentation if you want to do that sometime. Because, you know, I agree with you. I think Sophia she's almost too big. And, you know, it helps if we can, you know, do a little more discernment, because, you know, if it's too big, then it gets a little confusing. But yeah, that was great, Angelique. Thank you.
I love the lonely initiatory incubation aspect of the sorting the seeds. That was beautiful. Thank you.
It reminded me of my when I was a teenager. My mom always give me this task of sorting the seeds and cleaning up the rice and stuff, but she was cooking. So in a way, I was being initiated.
What a lovely, sorry, what a lovely feminine initiation, Azim.
Yeah.
It's a lovely image.
Yeah.
Make sure everybody gets something to say before we go here.
Yeah, Dahlia, do you have a comment for us?
No, I just have so many thoughts, and I enjoy listening today, so I'll incubate for a while my thoughts.
Diane?
Sorry, I get kind of confused because I've got two things going here. But wow, I just feel like this is just such this whole session is just a big synchronicity. I have a lot of sorting of seeds to do before I say very much, but I would like to say a couple of things, Gary, that you're the meditations that we did, both the Qigong and the other Nidra, I found very helpful to me because I was able to process some of the effects that the current affairs are having on me by developing, compassion and giving it out. And that was very helpful. And the fact that you started with these tarot cards for this particular session, I think started it off in this whole train from Azine to Kat to Angelique. And then I'd like to mention that, Craig, you had recommended von Franz's book on dreams and death. And I was able to, I'd listened to it before. On YouTube, there's an interview, a radio interview of von Franz regarding that. And it's in French. It says it has subtitles, but it doesn't. But if any of you are interested in if you can figure out how to get the subtitles, you've heard it too. Yes, it's just, I do think it would be a good follow-up for this book to do that. And it's just you're asking about archetypes. Well, I was walking on the beach listening to this, and then I just felt like an egg walking on the beach. And then, you mentioned the myth, the personal myth that I had sent you, Craig, and how this brought up for me that myth that I had written, and it was about 25 years ago. And I went back and looked at it. And so I'm going to be in some kind of womb, sorting this out and see what I might add to it. It did guide me. That's all. I mean, there's other people that need to talk, and this is so big. This is so big. So much to say about it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dave.
Aline, Annette, and Charles, and
Eva?
Ava.
Aline? Ava, yeah. Aline, you want to go next?
Yeah, I wanted to say about the corn dollies, which is a prehistoric megalithic custom that survives today in parts of southwest England where I used to live. And it's a corn dolly, and it's made at the end of a harvest, and it looks like a doll that's all made out of wheat. And they make one with the very last collection of the harvest to ensure fertility for the next year's harvest. And people put them on bedposts if they want their kids to get pregnant, they want to be grandparents. And I did that with my niece, and she did that with her daughter, and it worked immediately, of course. Of course. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Wow. The history of corn
Annette,
dollies.
Annette, and
Yeah, let's
Ava,
go.
and
Would you like
Charles.
to comment, Annette?
Yeah, this is lovely. Yeah, and I love also the way Angelique you describe all the structures to it. Like usually, I think it just happens to people, and like in my case, I just got bits of fragments of it, you know, and I see that with other women and men also, you know, but yeah, so that's amazing, and yeah, everybody's story is wonderful to hear today. Lovely.
Great. Thank you, Annette. Charles? You there, Charles?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a whole lot to say. I just enjoyed listening today, so that's all.
Great. Ava?
Thank you, Charles. Ava, yeah.
Yes, this remind me of my friend who made her doctor's degree on Sophia. Maybe I had to ask her and read it. And it's a lot to melt down. And it's hard to see this woman having this kind of hard putting on herself all that blame in the last part you took. I can't, I'm a little bit suspicious about Marie-Louise from France.
She's going to explain that, Ava, though. She's going to explain how it really balances out.
Yes, I have read it, but I can't melt it down. It's hard
it's
to.
hard to read. It is.
Yes,
I mean,
yeah.
as far as she's saying, it's a very delicate balance.
Thank you.
She says one place that, hey, you're crazy. You who do you think you are, the great mother? To someone who thinks that it's their responsibility, and the other one who doesn't think it's a responsibility at all. She says, well, I do think it's interesting that you've had 3 husbands die on you. You know? So she wants to see what their attitude is before she says anything. Anyway, well, thank you. This has been beautiful. Thank you, everybody. Charles, you didn't say anything, but I always have Ava and Annette and Angelique. Beautiful. Azine, next time we'll hear yours. And Gary, you did a great job. Diane and Kat.
Yeah, and I want Angelique to do something on the Athena archetype, because that was just incredible, you know. And I like that it's a little more focused, you know.
Yeah.
I'm very reluctant to get my hands on an archetypal image like hers. My heart is with the earlier goddesses, where they have a body, not just Sophia and a head. I am not the right woman to do that work.
She's too Gnostic. Yeah, like you, it was very important to say she's more of a Gnostic figure from the Gnostic realm.
That's right. There's a lot of masculine in her.
Yes.
But Eva, I think I agree with you. I think Louise von Franz was greatly affected by Jung's view on women, and he had a very occult, dark view on them and on their power.
Yes.
Perhaps greater. He was seeing greater power in them than they actually had. And I wonder that if that is valid, what Jung thought and Marie-Louise von Franz says, then men very nicely can kill their women through projection. So, but that was not, I have not read it anywhere in the Jungian lore, but maybe there is. So we might have equivalent power of different natures. Otherwise, it might not be that valid. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's sort of hard to wrap around, but I think the one thing that we can get out of here is more of a flavor of the just how deep the Great Mother is and how deep nature is. You know, we don't have to apply it to living women, but I think she gives us a real taste of the you know, her the devouring Hecate, Kali, Gorgon aspect, along with Demeter and the others. But anyway, well, thank you, everybody, and it was just wonderful. I really appreciate all of you. So we'll see you next time. Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.